Good morning, everyone. Hungry Black Man here, here with Jill, who is on mute. You got to take you got to take the mute off.
I thought you had. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Good. I'm in this station now, so I have to, keep the mask about me at all times.
So, guys, we have this morning a very special guest. I would say rock star attorney, but that's an understatement in the sense of what his worth is to the culture. Attorney Lee Merritt represents the family of George Floyd as well as Ahmaud Arbery in these very, very serious cases that are happening around the country. He has been tapped to give advice on so many critical cases around police brutality and civil rights. And so we're going to definitely have a great conversation with Mr. Merritt today in regards to what's happening in our country and specifically how we are defending and defending our people in our communities. And so I really, really want to thank him for being here. And
yes, thank you.
And for his time. So before we got started, guys, we know that there's a lot happening here in Miami-Dade County. So we wanted to just start out with a video that is a bit disturbing. Mr. Merritt himself actually hasn't seen this.
Wow.
This is going to be a bit disturbing. This actually just happened. So we're going to start the conversation off here, and then we're going to go from there. Mr. Merritt, did you want to say anything before I show the video?
No, just thank you for having me. I know that Florida has been at the forefront of the civil rights movement, and while facing some difficulties with the coronavirus and with organizing and leadership. So I appreciate it.
We are
part of the
a
conversation.
hotbed of injustice around here right about now.
Right.
So we're going to get into this troubling story right now. Let's put you guys up here. All right.
Miami International Airport.
And the police director is reacting tonight. Let's go back and look with us. Roy Ramos live with the shocking footage. Roy.
Louis and Nicole, this is body camera video that you'll see in just a moment. And in the top right corner, it has a timestamp that says this all likely happened today right here at Miami International Airport. In the video, you can see a Miami-Dade police officer punching a woman in the face. Actions the police director says he does not condone. Body camera video posted on the Instagram page of Billy Corbin showing two Miami-Dade police officers speaking to a woman at Miami International Airport. In the video that has come to light and we have learned has been seen throughout the department, you can see a woman begin to confront one of the officers, at one point coming face to face with him. What you want to do?
Oof.
That's when the officer is seen quickly stepping back and punching the woman in the face. The two officers then tackle her to the ground and place her into cuffs. Video prompting Miami-Dade Police Director Freddie Ramirez to immediately relieve the officers of duty. He then took to Twitter to release this statement that read in part, "I am shocked and angered by a body camera video that I just saw involving one of our officers. I've immediately initiated an investigation and ordered that the involved officers be relieved of duty. Actions such as these undermine the hard work that we have invested in our community and causes my heart to break for our community and the vast majority of our officers who dedicate their lives to serving our county."
Yeah, that was a lot. So before we get into that, I wanted to give Mr. Merritt an opportunity just for those folks who are tuning in, and I know that they are excited to hear from you, but I wanted you to, if you could, just to talk about how the large profile cases that you represent, when those cases start spreading across the country, right? And folks start being a bit just hypersensitive to them. When we have cases like this in Miami, do you feel that there is positive traction or negative traction that impacts the ability of smaller towns or localized civil rights issues or police brutality issues as it relates to these larger cases. Like some folks may feel that, the George Floyd case may negatively or positively impact the cases that happen in their hometowns, whether it's folks being angry and saying, hey, look, this needs to stop, because they see the ridiculousness behind what these officers are doing? Or do you think it's an adverse reaction where folks start saying, well, that's not happening here, and it's kind of like juxtaposing atrocities, if you will? Do you find that has an impact on those cases, or do you think that it doesn't?
I think one thing is consistent. We live in the deadliest, most brutal police culture in the industrialized world. And so no other nation on planet Earth brutalized. You don't see videos like this popping up all over the country. And during the coronavirus, on average, American police killed 3 people a day. I'm sorry, they shot 3 people to death a day. Our law enforcement kills many more people than that a day across the country. The numbers are staggering, but they are consistent. So during the coronavirus, it was 3 a day. Currently, it's 3 a day. With protests, it's 3 a day. Without protests, it's 3 a day. We live in a violent police culture that we've just come to accept. And so whether or not George Floyd highlights that, my concern about the George Floyd case in particular is that people understand it as a case, like in isolation, as opposed to a movement. Yet when we say George Floyd, we're saying so many other names. That name now has become representative of all the other cases in the smaller markets, or that receive less attention, or hopefully on occasion have less deadly results. But regardless, the idea of the protest in every major state in America and across the world now is not only justice for George Floyd, but to prevent the next George Floyd, to change the culture. And I don't know that we've begun to properly do that. We've heard in the media and among activist circles this concept of defunding the police. I don't think everyone gets what that is. And people who live in places like Miami-Dade or Chicago, where I'm from, Los Angeles, we think, hold on, don't we need some sort of protection? Because these places are dangerous. There is a drug war going on. There is massive poverty. There is more guns than people without the proper training, in licensing, et cetera. So ultimately, I think that the movement is awakening people around the country, no matter where you are originally, to the systemic problems in policing. But will a just outcome, or anything close to just outcome in George Floyd mean a just outcome for this young woman? It depends on how far we take the movement.
Now, you're representing the George Floyd's family, or are you representing you're representing the civil rights case, but not the criminal case against the cops? Like the state is prosecuting those officers, right?
Well, that's correct. With the state and the federal government is reviewing. I think we can take a second to sort of do a civics lesson. I'm sure you understand it, but a lot of people kind of miss out on this. All right, so our legal system has 2 strains, either a civil strain or a criminal strain, right? I'm a civil attorney, and so that means I go after municipalities, cities, elected officials, entities, and individuals in their civil capacity, which is their fiduciary capacity. And then separately, and the one that people are generally most concerned about is the criminal case. The criminal case is always brought by, well, I should say initially by the state, county, or municipality. Would be a district attorney's office, a attorney general for a state, or a sort of county wide elected official. And to the extent that as in the Ahmaud Arbery case, where the state fails to take action despite evidence of a crime, the federal government can come in and say, well, let's look at this from a civil rights capacity. Now, their civil concern is the same civil concern that I do. They use the Constitution to say whether or not there was a constitutional violation. But the federal government, of course, has jails to put people in. I don't, right? And so my role, in the civil rights attorney's role, and really the community's role, is to take the parallel civil case that obviously the family is personally invested in, share information with the state attorney's office, share, for example, in Ahmaud Arbery's case, we were able to discover the video that was not initially available when we first became involved in the case. We took that video, turned it over to the authorities. The authorities then went on and made the arrest. We saw that they had a local district attorney there who was not particularly interested in prosecuting the men who killed Ahmaud Arbery. And so we put pressure on the local government to replace them with a more aggressive prosecutor in the person of Jonette Holmes. And so we have a civil case, but because we represent the families, we can use our information and influence to drive criminal outcomes.
And so that is a really great explanation for folks who they'll see yourself or even Attorney Ben Crump, and we ask the question as a community, like, well, why are these people like getting off? When they get off on a criminal charge, that has no, you as a civil rights attorney, you all have no real, you have no real influence, like a direct influence on how that case is tried in the criminal courts at all.
So we do have influence, but we should sometimes we arguably should not. And so I've always said that we play a bigger role than we have, right? So there's a potential to have influence. We're all attorneys, right? And so when we meet with the district attorney, we can legally go to talk to them about the law. And because we're all covered by the Constitution, we can provide advice, guidance, et cetera. They don't always have to be receptive to it. When they're not receptive, we can use the media to expose the failures in their actions or lack thereof. I think civil rights attorneys, local attorneys all over the country, should take more take more responsibility for outcomes, because when we get convictions, rare convictions of police officers, we receive the credit for it, despite the fact that we didn't try the case. And so if we get the credit for that, we should also get the blame. But understanding that you're right, we don't try the cases. We don't make the indictment decisions. We sharply dispute when the prosecutors don't do their job. I can tell I was actually a law student when Trayvon Martin, for example, was killed, and George Zimmerman went to trial, and I watched those prosecutors put on a very poor presentation of the evidence.
Terrible.
And I was confident that Mr. Zimmerman would get off based on their presentation. If I was representing the family at the time, as I'm sure my brother Ben Crump did, he had an obligation to go to those prosecutors and then go to the media and say, the way that they're presenting this case is going to result in a failure. Now, and that's a tactical thing, because I've had a case like that where I saw the prosecutors throwing the case, in the case of Antoine Rose, 17-year-old shot in his back in Pittsburgh. And I watched those try the case. They didn't hire the proper experts. They didn't humanize Antoine Rose. They never called him Antoine. They called him the decedent or the defendant or the suspect. And I watched that trial unfold. It was like a slow-moving train wreck. I said, they're going to lose this trial. And I started going to the media and saying, they're throwing this trial. They have not hired the proper experts. The state has ineffective assistance of counsel. Now, of course, that makes the state not want to work with you anymore. You know, they don't want to be your friends. They're not going to give you coffee before trial.
Right.
But, you know, we don't care.
Well, you know, and that's why the Rodney, Rodney Jacobs. With the Civilian Investigative Panel, and the work that they're doing is really monumental. And I'm hoping that it's a model that is replicated throughout the country, because they become sort of a conduit between the police and the defendant or whatever. If you have an issue, then you can go, if you had a run-in with the police and it went wrong and you're going to go to trial, but you need some backup, right? Like you just said, there's certain places where your attorneys can't go. And there's certain, you just ain't got that kind of money. And so you can go to the Civilian Investigative Panel, tell them your story. If they think it's valid, they then can take it to the police and say, we have an issue here, and we need to see if we can resolve this in some manner before you go to court or whatever. And if they don't, then they can come to us. They can come to the media, and which is what has happened in several cases that, I'm at work right now.
Don't start
Bring this
that
up
shit
with a
today,
T-10.
Jill. Please don't.
Look, damn it. Okay. Hey, I just so you know, I'm duo jobs. I'm on Hot 105 right now, and I'm doing this with you right now. And so we are 3 weeks in, getting our system together. But to my point about the CIP and why I hope that that grows throughout the country, because a lot of things you just mentioned that you can't put your hands on, the CIP can bring them to the media, bring light to them in a different way from the, from the defendants or the suspect's view, because that panel is put together of people that have a tendency to be a little closer in line with who that person is and know a little bit more about their life experience,
Well,
and
the
can
other
kind
thing
of
is,
craft a narrative to bring it to, the urban station in the market. You know what I'm saying? The black
well,
newspaper in the market. Right.
yeah. And the other thing is that the African American community, quite frankly, has had a hostile relationship necessarily with the legal apparatus, right? We
Yeah.
don't see prosecutors and think, oh, that's the homie that's going to help, get someone locked up. We see prosecutors and think they're trying to put me in prison. That is an extension of law enforcement who is constantly violating our civil rights and human rights. And so I'm not trying to work with them. I'm not trying to be a witness for them, even if it
Right.
means prosecuting a cop, because I don't
Right.
think they're sincere in their desire to prosecute a cop. And in a lot of regions, that's true, that they don't, when you send, for example, a Texas Ranger, out to investigate the residents at an apartment complex after a cop kills someone, like we did in the case of Botham Jean. The community is not thinking, hey, look, it's a man with a gun at my door. Let me talk to him.
Right.
They're thinking, am I next? Right? Because this
Right.
is the deadliest police culture on the planet.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that the civil rights attorney or the activist can be is a liaison between the state authorities and the in the community, because people aren't afraid to talk to me. And in fact, they flood my inbox with messages and tips, and they feel comfortable interfacing with me,
Right.
the black attorney that they
Yeah.
recognize. They not so much with the state prosecutor's office.
Right.
Let me ask you, as far as the cases that you're currently working on now, would you be able to share with the folks the cases that you have now that they're familiar with, and the cases that you've successfully have closed? Just so folks, because we hear a lot about the cases, but they
I have over 57 open cases.
whoa,
And yeah, in
the
these
ones that
cases,
they would know.
and yeah, in these cases last quite a bit. I think one of my earliest ones that folks unfortunately don't know, and the truth is, I don't know what people know and what they don't. What they
Of course,
should know
of
is a
course.
15-year-old named Jordan Edwards. A 15-year-old named Jordan Edwards from North Texas was going to a high school house party, his first high school house party, a straight A honor roll student, football player, never been in trouble. There's a bunch of kids at the party. They got some noise complaints. Law enforcement arrived and told them to go home. And so Jordan got in the car and went home. A law enforcement officer during the breakaway decided that he wanted his car to stop. And he told the car to stop. The boys were also told to go home. And so they continued to drive. And Roy Oliver lifted a high-powered rifle and shot into the car, shot about 5 high-powered rounds into the car, striking Jordan Edwards in the head and killing him. His conviction, Roy Oliver's conviction back in 2017, was the first conviction of a police officer out of Dallas County in almost 50 years.
Jesus Christ. I
He
put it up.
received a 15-year sentence, which of course is woefully insufficient for the murder of a 15-year-old, and the horror that his brothers had to endure because they were in the car when Jordan was struck, and they will never unsee what they were forced to see in that situation. And of course, they lost their brother, and that family is still reeling. I have 1,000 stories like that, so you have to be a little more specific when you ask me about my cases. We would be here all day, except I can't be here all day.
No, of course, of course. So specifically the case with that, I guess that's where folks have a learning curve that we just don't. Well, I can include myself. I don't even get that. I don't understand how. I mean, is it just a jury? I mean, how are these people getting these light sentences for doing these heinous crimes? And then, you look at the fact that Tamir Rice was killed because of a toy gun. I mean, not a toy gun. Was it a toy gun?
We keep lying about the role of police officers in our society. What juries are forced to deal with, really to some of their shock and dismay, is how much latitude we give police officers to kill people. They literally are trained killers with a license to kill. And so generally they can make some articulable facts. I fear for my life is a valid defense. It's absurd if you came into my home and I shot you, and shot me, you generally couldn't say you feared for your life. But Amber Geiger did. She entered someone else's home, shot him to death, both of them drawn, and said, I fear for my life. And it was a valid defense. The legal community, other police officers took the stand and said, yeah, I probably would have did the same thing. There's a black guy there. It's illogical, but that is the truth about our legal system. Until we start telling the truth about our legal system, which is we train police officers to fight a so-called war on drugs, which is really a war on black and brown communities. They over police inner city communities. They walk around, they look for drugs, they look for guns, and their job is to keep the prisons filled in the largest prison industry in the history of the world. In doing so, if you're fighting a war, a proverbial war, and you're kidnapping people and taking them to these prisons and locking them away for years for being poor, for being sick, for being addicted, for being
sleep in the Wendy's drive-thru,
for jogging, for sleep, and
he didn't make it.
The community is always going to revolt against your desire to put them in prison, to limit their freedoms. And so you're going to have people who don't comply. And when you have a comply or die culture, you're going to have a lot. You're going to get what we have, which is the deadliest police culture in the modern world.
And so when you see these cases, and this is a bit personal question, as an intelligent black man, as a black man who is successful in helping these families, how do you, like, just hearing about the atrocity makes me sad, like just hearing about it. How do you handle 50 odd cases that are this emotionally heavy? Like, how are you able to be strong for the families and at the same time process this as a human? Like, how do you do that? Like, what process or what either spiritual basis or emotional protection do you use so that you're strong for these families and that you still, because I would imagine all of this angst and negativity that is from these officers that did these horrible things or in these situations, they're pressing their heat on you as well, I'm sure, like emails and all sorts of crazy shit. So how do you process that?
Yeah, I believe in purpose, right? So I don't think that we can resolve the entire problem. A lot of us as African Americans have to deal with the trauma that is being black in America, the trauma of not acknowledging systemic racism, the trauma of having these slow moving car wrecks. When I say slow moving car wrecks, right now I can see under the law that Derek Chauvin has a clear route to get off. Right?
Are you serious?
Yeah, no. I've seen multiple cases throughout the country where they use their knee to kill someone, to hold them, to restrain them, to choke them, to kill them, and they were granted qualified immunity over and over and over again. So, despite this case being high profile and being upsetting to watch, that is the kind of thing in America that police officers get off on, right? And you know that, despite the fact that you said, "Are you serious?" You were there for Tamir Rice. You were there for Eric Garner.
Right.
He said, "I can't breathe." You were there for Mike Brown. You were there. None of those resulted in any indictments, convictions, or arrests.
This one wasn't different, though. That's the only reason I said that, because I love when we talk.
Our response is different.
Yeah. So I was asking. It's not different because it was so long. Like the fact that he was there.
It's different because it was so long, but it doesn't change the legal calculus. It changes our response. What we're saying now is we don't care if it is against the law. Like, we don't care if the law does authorize them to do that. The law needs to change.
Right.
Not the
right.
scenario. So I think that's really the only difference, right? And you know, arguably, I can go look at the 9 cases that I pulled and said, "Oh, was it 8 minutes and 46 seconds, or was it 3 minutes and 56 seconds?" Like, really, does that matter? Right? What we care about is they keep killing us and getting away with it.
And so when you look at these cases and there's a legal precedent, there's obviously public opinion. How much of public opinion actually matters? Does it matter at all? I mean, when it comes into the court of law, I mean, or is it just literally like, hey, the law says that he can put his knee on his neck and, you know, you shouldn't send this guy to jail because he followed the law?
So I'm a constitutional lawyer, right? What that means is actually I don't believe much in the law. There's so many laws, state codes, and things like that. A lot of them are unconstitutional. Most of them are unconstitutionally enforced against the Black community. So I don't look at the situation and say, you know, is that against the law or not against the law? I look at it and say, is it right? In our justice system is supposed to just organize people to make a pronouncement. That's what a jury is. It's organized people, a jury of our peers to make a pronouncement about whether or not this is something that we will accept as a society. They'll lay out the law for you in terms of the codes that they broke, but there's something called jury nullification, where a jury can say, yeah, I heard the law, but when he shot that 15-year-old in the head and there was smoke coming out of his head in front of his brothers, I don't really care what you say about the law. He's going to jail. And more often than not, when you see police officers in these rare, less than 1% of the cases, convictions, is jury nullification. They're saying, I know that officers are allowed to kill. I know that he's going to say, I fear for my life. I know that that's supposed to, in most jurisdictions, get them off. But in front of this jury, that's why jury selection and jury participation is so important. But in this county, we're not going to allow it. And so that's the grassroots way of fighting this. We also get to go further up the river and say, you know, I spoke before the United States Senate recently. I spoke at the White House and said, look, the laws that you all dealt our community are ineffective. They don't value Black life. They provide obnoxious protections to law enforcement, and the law itself has to change. The other thing is we can't continue to seek justice from the system designed to oppress us, right? Me and Sean King just recently launched what's called the TJRC, the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commissions. If you remember, at the end of South African apartheid, and that's by the way, it's in Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. When apartheid came to an end, they had commissions, truth commissions, where they had witnesses come forward, accuse law enforcement officers in that case of murder, of kidnap, prove their case, and people had to deal with consequences in institutions that were outside of the legal system, because the legal system had put Nelson Mandela in jail. The legal system had justified the murder of so many other people. It was obnoxious, the idea that now we're going to bring these people who are part of the legal system before their own legal system and see if we can get a conviction. The likelihood is you can't. It's not designed for you to convict them. The laws were designed for them to get off. And so they created an entire separate commissions that did have legal authority. And, you know, it's the sort of we launched yesterday in a very quiet way because we're building it out. But that's what we need in America. We need it. When we say that the justice system is not broken, it's operating exactly as it's designed to operate, then we can't continue to go to it for justice. It's not a justice factory. We should stop calling it the justice system. That's their legal system. It's a system of oppression.
I had Sue Ann Robinson on recently, and she talked, you know, and in parting, I was like, you know, what is the one thing that at this very moment we can do? And she said, stop denying jury service. She's like, we do not participate on juries the way that we need to in order to. She's like, imagine if you see a case and the person on the jury you believe to be innocent and you don't show up for them. You get served. You're like, I don't want to do that. I got to work. I'm not going to make my money. That means that's one less person at that table that can possibly see your point of view and change the dimensions of that jury. And every time we don't show up, you know, our voices are not at the table. And at this moment, like that's, you know, you get in where you fit in. And that's when, you know, when the average citizen says, what can I do? Show up for jury duty.
That's right.
Would you agree?
No, I absolutely agree. And I really appreciate you all having me on, have this conversation. Unfortunately, I have to take off. Only had half an hour to deliver.
No, yeah, of course.
But I look forward to coming back and continuing the conversation. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being
Appreciate
here.
you.
Take care.
All right.
Fight the good fight, my friend.
That was very, very informative. Very informative. So
Yes.
I didn't want to show all of our videos because the tone of our show is a bit different, and I didn't want to go into all that buffoonery. I did not want to do that and take away from the seriousness. I'm sorry. No, I had a bunch of.
Oh, well, I mean, while we had him and he had a short time window, you know.
Yeah. So I think that what we are attempting to do with this show is to highlight these things that are happening and really bring on the folks who are at the forefront of solving most of the problems. The thing is that I'm not a lawyer, and I'm so ignorant to the true inner workings of the justice system. And I think that he did a really great job in explaining to us how that works. Now, we're going to transition over into this sheriff over in Clay County, Florida, Sheriff Daryl Daniels. He's our Sambo of the day.
You know what?
And
You're funny. What time is it?
You're good. 9:36.
Okay.
So this guy has a message for everybody. And he definitely has a message for the Black Lives Matter people. And he is proposing to deputize pretty much everybody.
I was going to say, it sounds like I know where this is going.
Oh, my God.
Just want to weigh in on what we're seeing going on, played out across the media or mainstream media in this country. Look, folks, don't fall victim to subjecting yourself to this conversation that law enforcement is bad, that law enforcement is the enemy of the citizens that we're sworn to protect and serve. We swore an oath.
Come on.
And in that oath,
It's the poor guy.
we swore to support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the government. And that we're duly qualified under the state Constitution to hold office. That is, for me as a sheriff, for these men and women as deputy sheriffs, and we end that with, so help me God. But God is absent from the media's message or Black Lives Matter or any other group out there that's making themselves a spectacle, disrupting what we know to be our quality of life in this country.
Is he serious?
In Clay County, we have a great quality of life. We have a great relationship with our community. But across this country, not so much. I just wanted to take a stand with these men and with these women who feel the same way that I do. Lawlessness, that's unacceptable in this country. Lawlessness, that's unacceptable in Clay County. And if you threaten to come to Clay County and think that for 1 second that we'll bend our backs for you, you're sadly mistaken. I know what happens when lawlessness prevails. And in this day and time, God is raising up men and women, just like the folks you see standing behind me, who will have strong backbones and will stand in the gap between lawlessness and the good citizenry that we're sworn to protect and serve. So you can threaten all you want. You can say, hey, let's go to Clay County, or let's go to some other peaceful county where their problems don't exist.
What?
Or not so much.
The fuck
like
is this guy
country,
talking about?
Or not so.
Or
Shabu.
strain, and where the people support their sheriff and support the men and women.
But this is what he was talking about. This is exactly it.
You have something waiting on you that you don't want. Yes, we'll protect your constitutional rights as long as you remain under the umbrella of peaceful protest or peaceful march. But the second that you step out from up under the protection of the Constitution, we'll be waiting on you.
What? We decide, right?
All
and we just sitting here waiting for you.
All the pain.
That's some ignorant
glory for all that 5 minutes will give you. Is it a threat? Absolutely not. But somebody has to step up in front of the camera and say, enough is enough. tearing up Clay County, that's not going to be acceptable. And if we can't handle you, you know what I'll do? I'll exercise the power and authority as the sheriff. And I'll make special deputies of every lawful gun owner in this county. And I'll deputize one purpose, to stand in the gap between lawlessness and civility. That's what we're sworn to do. And that's what we're going to do. You've been warned.
Damn. Listen, I'm sure the Clay County Tourist Bureau was not happy to see that shit.
What the fuck was that? And then, so now you got this fucking Sambo making these threats, carrying on like this in this racist goddamn county. I mean, a county of 190,000 people. So it's a little bigger than the city of Miami Gardens. So he first of all, who the fuck is going there? He's like, someone's got to come here and tear up.
What is that? What's the city? What's the major city there?
I think it has portions of St. Augustine in it.
That's in Florida.
Yeah, this is Florida.
Clay County, Florida. Well, let's make sure we put an X on that on the map as a do not enter zone.
It is included in the Jacksonville metropolitan area.
Well,
so
Jacksonville, there you go.
I cannot. Oh, here we go. Cities. It has well, guys, I guess our plans are ruined. We can't go to Green Cove Springs and Keystone Heights. Those are the two cities. So
our life will never be the same.
I had plans to come fuck that town up. I am so.
I heard they had a great Ritz-Carlton with a spa there.
Yeah, and just an amazing nightlife.
That's funny.
So
whatever.
Sheriff, and so this same sheriff is under investigation, and it was just handed over to FDLE. He apparently was dating this young black woman who was his employee. And they had a fight or whatnot, and then she allegedly started to stalk him, and he called his deputies to come arrest her. And so they arrested her, but they couldn't keep her because there was no charge. There was no to charge her with. So he's under investigation for that. So
he won't be around much longer.
Well, they love that. They'll defend him. See, that's why they act like that, because they know that when you do that, you survive with them, because as long as you're a part of their system, in the sense of like you are the conduit of their what they want to see in black people. Like those people are very important.
Right, but he just put himself on the map. So for every justice organization, it's like, okay, well, let's put a pin there because something is bound to happen there any second now.
True.
And they will ride in. Oh yeah.
So this
is the real color of change.
Now, this woman here, you guys are gonna really this is just crazy. I know I showed you guys this woman who I think it was a week ago, who spit in the face of a teenage protester. And this is what she has to say. This is what she has to say about herself. And mind you, this is a woman who is an attorney. And so this is what she's saying now. Of course,
I have to look away.
Changes the tune. Here we go.
A teenager during a Black Lives Matter protest wants to apologize to him and another person she's accused of shoving on the sidewalk.
Oh God, so fucking nasty.
Initial appearance in court.
That is so nasty.
Snapson versus Stephanie Rapkin.
Attorney Stephanie Rapkin made her virtual initial appearance on Thursday, charged with disorderly conduct along with a hate crime penalty enhancer and battery to a law enforcement officer.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jason Luzak appears with Stephanie Rapkin, who appears via video.
Prosecutors say the 64-year-old spit on 17-year-old Eric Lucas, a Shorewood High School student, during a Black Lives Matter protest. She's also accused of shoving 21-year-old Joe Friedman.
We have made an offer to participate in what I would call a restorative justice type
the fuck out of here.
Meeting.
While the court discussed a no-contact order, her attorney said she wishes to meet with both young men and apologize.
And discuss with them and apologize for the actions.
An attorney representing Friedman told Fox 6 in part they were reluctant
Just
to sit
look
with
at her.
Rapkin if this was a publicity stunt. While the attorney representing Lucas says in part, Eric continues to focus on his positive message for social change and on sharing that message with the community. Perhaps Ms. Rapkin could learn something from him. Hate is not the answer.
There will be no contact with the victim unless the victims agree in writing to participate in a restorative justice type programming.
Rapkin entered a not guilty plea. Her attorney says they will challenge the hate crime enhancer. Rapkin is due back in Milwaukee County Court July 24th. Outside the courthouse, Angelica Sand.
Insane. And then
And
this
she pled not guilty, and we see the whole thing.
crazy. And
What is her? I mean, what is her excuse? Like what? You spit in his face.
And then this is our last Karen. These Karen reports, I might have to take a break because it's too much. This woman decided to pull out a fucking gun on a black woman that she almost ran over.
Karen is like the donkey of the day.
No, they're worse. I'll deal with a donkey of the day any day.
You're right.
These women are just, I just don't get it. Here we go. Ram.
She got the gun on me. He already hit me with the car. Call him. I'm telling. Get the license plate. Get the license plate now. Because you were never about to hit me with the damn car. You about to hit me with the car? Both of y'all put guns on me, okay? Call Richard back up to the police. Call Richard back up here now. Don't you fucking jump behind. No, I ain't jumping on your girl. What you doing? Your husband was in there. Get the fuck back. Did you see that? They both pointed that gun on me. He was trying to hit me with the car when I was going back. You see that? And then when I hit his car, he wanted to jump out the car and put a gun on me. That is crazy. Trump making it real comfortable. Call the police. No, don't go anywhere. Call the police. 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 You about to hit me with the car. Yo, they motherfucker trying to hit me. And they put a gun on me. Move out the way. Yeah, I got it.
So thankfully she was arrested.
Good.
Thankfully she was arrested. And then for the it's so many Karens that I gotta show more than one because this is the last one, and this one is a bit funny, but this is the last one.
This is why we have everything happens for a reason, and the fact that this coronavirus is out of control and we need to stay in our homes. This is why. That's why I need to stay in my house.
What you want? You want to ask me where my mask was? Why? How the fuck am I eat with a mask on? How am I eat? You want me to eat? How we supposed to eat? This woman gonna come over and ask me why I ain't got my mask on? Mask right here. She gonna ask me why I ain't got my mask on. I'm trying to eat my goddamn food. Now how the fuck I'm eating my goddamn food with no mask on? This woman right here gonna ask us where our mask at. She come over here and say, hey, how you doing? What you doing? How you been? Cuz Market, how you been? Susan King right here want to come over here and embarrass herself, and we ain't did none to her. Go by damn mask. How we gonna eat? Y'all eating the same damn. How you gonna eat? You eating? Ain't he eating? With no mask on, Susan. Now, Susan, you on the news channel now, honey, because you the fucked up. At this point, don't come up here and ask me what my goddamn mask was. How I'm gonna eat without my damn mask on? How you gonna eat without your mask? This woman gonna come over here and ask me where my mask is. I'm trying to eat. Ain't that right? How you supposed to eat with my mask on? Ain't that crazy?
Oh God.
Well, you too close, 6 feet. Okay.
I know that's right. 6 feet back up.
Don't touch me again. She had too many damn drinks or something, honey. She lost her back. No, we ain't did nothing. We ain't did nothing. My nerves. She's gonna come over here and ask us where our mask is, y'all. We trying to eat.
Like,
I'm trying.
what I just don't understand, like the psychology behind like saying to yourself, I am going to go fuck with this person for no reason. I'm going
Well,
to,
see,
I just
you know
don't
what it is?
get it.
You know what it is? The other day I was having the conversation that this is how the generation, or maybe two before us, lived on a daily basis. And it was pretty legal. You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. And that's why they have that level of entitlement, because it's there. Maybe when she was 12, she saw her mama do that to somebody. So in her DNA, she feels like, well, we're the superiors anyway. So I can question you about anything because you are not like me. And, you're beneath me. And I can question your judgment, your very existence for sport. That's what that is. Nothing, and none of this is new. It's just like we can't believe we're going through. It's still happening. Like, didn't you hear that civil rights happened? You know what I'm saying?
No.
But it's not new. It ain't new.
And that's why it's important to have people like Lee Merritt.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to have civil rights attorneys like that, because I think what he's doing is such an incredible job, and having those cases, especially those high profile cases. One of the things that I respect about the way that he tries these cases and works with the families, and being able to kind of carry that heavy load for folks is a very difficult thing to do. So when I look at these Karens, though, I think it's a pathology that needs to be investigated. I think something is clinically wrong, and maybe there's something. No, I think there's something clinically wrong, and I think that we need to research that. I think they need to research white women and find out if there's something, psychologically happening that's creating these Karens. I think there may be something psychologically, or possibly this is not. It's not something.
This is not right,
because it goes back into history. The lies, the
right.
acting,
That's what I'm saying. It is
erratic behavior. It's just something is wrong. Transitioning to our conversation about elections, Joe, you wanted to talk about how this year we need to be different in the sense of our everyone that's watching from, we have people from Texas, we have people from California that has chimed in, and we really want to encourage everyone to be focused on their localized elections, specifically in their regional elections. So we have a Miami-Dade County race. There is a Broward County state attorney race that's very important, and obviously our state attorney's race. I think that what we're doing. Go ahead.
Well, okay. So I would love to hear from them in terms of what would help you vote more effectively, right? A lot of times what we hope to do with what we plan to do with Fresh Squeezed is bring the candidates to you. And if they won't come tell you that they won't come and explain their platform to the best as we understand it. And then hopefully if they have a counterpoint of view, they will come on and make it. But in terms of like cheat sheets, remember I was telling you, I got about 5 minutes. Remember I was telling you that I was working on a project. The thesis being, the Black community made a tremendous amount of movement between, so let's say 1945 and 68, right? Much more than we have, particularly legislatively, since. What was it? What was different? How did they, with so much less than we have now, how did they make all that progress, right? And it's because there were spaces where they could be together without others listening or a part of it or anything else. And radio at that time, there were lots. I use lots. Well, yeah, lots compared to where we are right this minute. There were a lot of very small Black-owned radio stations. And the DJs on the radio stations would have code songs, which were like code words. So like when they would have picnics, right? And they would invite everybody to come out. We having a picnic this Saturday on such and such a hill, and come on out. And then when they would get there, they would have like pamphlets for them that, okay, so the election is on this day and it's on this street, but you're going to have to go this route in order to get there to avoid the Klan and the police and whoever else that might be stopping you, or you know what I'm saying, maybe a danger to you trying to get to those polls, right? And then if they did, it's like, and if something happens when you're that way, if you hear us play James Brown, that means go this way. Or if you hear us play this, that means that go that way. You see what I'm saying? And so that's how they were able to make so much progress. And so this is sort of like that. It's in that same thought that we can talk amongst ourselves, as much as we can with, I don't know, what is it, StreamYard,
Yeah.
This is all being recorded someplace, but who the hell cares, as long as there's a way for us to have these conversations with each other and exchange the kind of information coded however we have to. So I'm sort of a little political junkie, so I can do a trivia or Jeopardy trivia on politics, but when it comes to local stuff and state statutes and stuff like that, I don't know most of that stuff, like you and I were just sharing, right? So if you are there, but there is voter suppression, there's so many. I'm looking at the comments while I'm talking. There are so many barriers to equality across the board. But what I'm saying is 30, 40 years ago, they had so much less than we did, and they made so much more progress. So we would be bastards of our history if we don't find a way to do that. And this is that election. It's as clear as I can possibly make it. This is it. This is whatever opportunities whatever the agenda is that is next. We are the ones that are going to do it. So you cannot do code words anymore, right? So that's what I'm saying. But what do you offer? What suggestions do you have? What information do you need? What would make you, I joke sometimes that a lot of times if we don't know who, particularly judges, right? You go and you don't know who they are. You look for a name that sounds Black or Jewish and vote for them, right? Or you leave, or you leave it empty, right? But you gotta know.
Oh my God, that is so sad and true. That's
right.
That's literally, we have a brother that just said he's running for state attorney in Broward. Harold.
Send us your info.
He says, "Hello, everyone. I'm running for state attorney in Broward County. This is an informative and much needed discussion. We need to force these issues at the top of political discussions and criminal justice agenda. Down ballot races matter." Can you inbox us so that we can have you on? We'll have you on tomorrow. And even someone put something about that we're not Black, that we're Indians.
Okay, whatever.
What? No, and that's still, I don't understand. Like, it's a big conversation with.
That's my issue, right? What difference is it? Indian, Black, whatever. What difference does that make? Does that make me better if I call myself an Indian? Get the fuck out of here with that. I don't want to hear that. I don't get caught up in names. All people of this black and brown shade, damn it. That's it. I'm not here for it.
That is the same exact voice that was in my head when I read. Yeah, and then someone said we are humans. I mean, we have to be able to be proud of who we are, and so if you want to call it indigenous, if you want to call it whatever, we have a spectrum of the way that we fucking look, We are Black people that have a range of blackness from black to brown to light brown to gold, but there is a spectrum of colors that are all Black. And so if you don't like I cannot have those conversations with those people. I can't do it. It's so it's draining. That's exactly how I feel. I'm like, okay, fine. You want to call me an indigenous person? Like, what does that change? What does that change?
Right. What difference does it make when I walk out in this world? I'm a Black woman, period. End of story. There's nothing else. There's nothing. So whatever you want to what you gonna do? Stand and have that conversation with somebody. I'm indigenous. Like, they give a, you not them. That's all they care about. You ain't them. So try that the next time somebody call you a nigga. You're like, I'm indigenous. Okay, well, indigenous nigga. Go someplace with that shit.
Oh, Jesus.
I don't know who it was, but
I just don't get it. But so we're gonna definitely follow the Broward County State Attorney's Office race, and like I said, today's show is gonna be cut a little short. We're doing an hour this week.
One more day.
We're doing an hour, but we'll be back to our normal selves starting on next week, Monday. So thank you guys for watching. We
love you
again tomorrow, and you guys have a good day.
Bye, y'all. You can turn me on hot 105.